Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance. We're at episode number 21, and today I talk with Cindy Kehagiaras on her debut romance novel, Two Princes. We discuss how turning 50 inspired her writing journey and how she's leveraged her experiences to write, pitch, and help publish her book. If you're also interested in seeing an additional piece of our conversation, you can check out Cindy's Instagram feed and check out her live where we talked very briefly about her writing journey. A couple of quick updates for the podcast. I'm actually going to be at a writing retreat next week with a couple of familiar voices that you have heard on the podcast. So episodes might be slightly delayed. Be sure to follow my Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, which is brand new, by the way, for any updates on upcoming episodes. With that said, let's jump right into the discussion.
Okay, turning 50 in the lockdown was, it got me to be quite cathartic about how I was going to react. I have two tween kids who were all of a sudden had to self-regulate online for school. My husband and I were both stuck in the house together, working. And I think my brain just kind of went back to a time where I had to figure things out on a quick turnaround. And that was when I was working in the corporate world and being thrown things left and right. And this story that I'd been kind of mulling over in my head for 30 years sort of it started getting clear. Does that make sense? It started playing out in scenes in my head, and the characters were having conversations, and I was just visualizing different scenes like it was in a movie. And then the characters were just talking to me all hours of the night and day, and I was waking up in the middle of the night with these conversations that I wasn't a part of. And the only way they would shut up is if I wrote them down. They would stop for a while and then they would come back, and then I'd hear a song that brought me back. And, it all kind of just was like maybe like a stress trigger of how to deal with what was going on in the world. Maybe I was just checking out completely, and I just needed a place to go that was under my control when everything else wasn't.
That does make sense to me, because I've talked to other authors who've they've described it kind of like you did. It got a little louder is what I've heard too, is where the characters start talking to you.
So loud.
Yes, exactly. And you can't get you have to do something because it's just in you and they won't stop.
They won't stop. They won't stop. And it wasn't just, it was Two Princes because that was the one that's been in my head for 30 years.
Okay.
But I ended up writing 5 full novels within a matter of 4 months, and they were all very different. And Two Princes was the one that just really stuck with me, and it always had. And I even had a playlist of music that helped me. I sent you the playlist.
Yes, I love the playlist. Okay. So I have to ask, because you did send me the playlist and I didn't even think about it until you sent it to me. Was the Two Princes taken from the song?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Oh, that was where the title came from, was from the song.
I love it.
I never read romance. And so when this started taking shape it was more of an adventure story in my head for a long time. But when it started taking root as a romance in my head, that song that was just it.
That was, nice. The inspiration.
Yeah.
So, and was that one of the ones you said this story in particular has been sitting with you for like 30 years.
Yeah.
So was it one of the first stories then that ever kind of came to mind that you've been thinking about and been like, man, I'd like to do something with that?
Because I didn't think about stories.
Okay.
My second life, I always say I'm in my fifth life. My second life was in my 20s, and I was career oriented, and I was a party girl, and I wanted to, just have fun and make a lot of money. And that was my deal. In my 30s, I had met my husband. I was a newlywed. I battled cancer. I beat it. I beat that bitch.
Okay, good. Good.
In my 40s, I was a new mom and a new business owner. I, retired. I went out of the advertising, and my sister, and I bought a children's resale store franchise. And so my 40s, that's what I did. I was a mom and a business owner. And then I turned 50 and the world stopped. And the store, I couldn't open the store. My kids were home in my nest. So I didn't have to worry about them being out in the world. And everything just kind of sort of got small. And that was scary to me, because everything in my life had always been so big. Everything was done real big. And so this was really small. So my brain decided to make things big.
That's so a lot of ways I've heard people have coped, right?
Yes.
Like when you kind of you were looking so outwardly so often, especially with kids and everything moving so quickly, like you said, then when you're forced to look inward, it's like, okay, what do I have in here that I could do
and
something
turning
with?
50 does that to you anyway. So, it just kind of was magnified, I think.
Well, and it's so interesting that you mentioned like having like you're on your fifth life, right? Because that was something my sister turned 50 in quarantine as well. And she was saying that, you know what? I've gotten to a point where I just want to live my best life. She was just, she bought some land. She wants to get some animals.
Can I cuss?
Go for it.
Okay. It's the bucket 50s.
I love
That's
that.
where we're at. We don't have to answer to our parents. We don't have to answer to our friends. We don't have to answer to our spouse. We don't have to answer to a boss. We don't have to answer to anybody. So fuck it.
I love it. I love that. So I'm going to tell my sister that too. You're in your fucking 50s. You're in your fucking
I hope the whole world hears it.
Well, and my mom kind of did that too when she entered. I remember towards the end of her 50s, she actually started working on her own romance novel because she was just like, why the hell not? Did you take any creative writing yourself?
No.
Okay.
I went to business school. I went to school for marketing and business, and that's what I wanted. I wanted the fast. I wanted the money. I wanted to, no, there was no creativity. There was just make money.
Oh, fair point. Fair point. Got to make a living, right?
I wanted to make a big living.
Ooh,
I wanted it
nice.
big. I wanted it big. So yeah, I worked really hard, and I did very well, so it was all good.
And I could see that translated a little bit to Two Princes because you got a lot of suspense. Everything was real big. You got royals in there. You got like a lot of like 90s, a love triangle. You got a lot of stuff going on, and I loved it.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
It was, but it was so, to me, I loved it so much because I love like suspenseful kind of romance, like with
good.
that element action. Oh yes. Like, romancing the story is kind of taken from Romancing the Stone.
Of course it was.
Come on, girl.
Of course it was.
But like, I love how you kind of channeled that. Was that like some of those 80s and 90s films, which had a lot of action in them, but a lot of romance?
Of course.
Like, were you like consciously doing that or just kind of going off of what you loved a lot?
It was actually what I read, because I'm an avid reader, but I just didn't read romance. I read spy novels and thrillers and mysteries and treasure hunts and, those kinds of things. But Romancing the Stone is probably my favorite movie. And the Saint, you mentioned The Saint in your notes. There is another one called American Dreamer that not a lot of people remember. American Dreamer, she was a housewife that entered a contest to write a fan story about for a romance series about a very adventurous, very sophisticated French crime-solving woman. And she wins the contest, goes to Paris, gets hit on the head, and thinks she's the character. Into all of this intrigue and this political stuff. It's a great American Dreamer with Jo Beth Williams. It was a great movie. It was so fun, so much fun in like the realm of Romancing the Stone.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Great movie.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't heard of it because I do love like anything like if it's like I'll usually sometimes look up, okay, if I like Romancing the Stone, what else would I like?
Oh, American Dreamer. Yeah,
okay.
It's not one of the more popular ones. It doesn't have big box office stars, but oh my God, what a great movie.
What made you kind of then want to write romance, or at least kind of your foray right into it?
It's a tiny bit cringy. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know how many trigger warnings are out there, but when I turned 50, I went to get my physical. And my doctor was like, everything looks really good, blood pressure, blah, 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 all this stuff, your, cholesterol, whatever. Everything was fine, except that I had a very low number of testosterone. Did you know that women had testosterone? Because I didn't. So the doctor suggested that I get a pellet put under the skin and it'll dissolve and it'll feed me the hormone.
Okay.
The only thing is that the dosage was too high.
Oh no.
And I'm reading one of my adventure spy novels and they had like a little hot moment and something triggered in me. And I kind of attacked my husband and it flipped this switch. It flipped a switch. And now Two Princes is a little hot.
It is. It does get very steamy.
It's pretty steamy. And it's not, it wasn't something that I had thought that I would write, but it was just came pouring out of me. And it just, I wasn't an innocent saint in my 20s. I had a kind of experience to draw on, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of flowed out of me. And so that is the essence of why this became a romance, and why I have 4 other books that are romances, 3 short stories, and they're all romance now, and that's all I want to read, and that's all I want to have in my to be read, files. All I want is romance now. I just want more and more and more of it, and I want all the tropes, and I want all of the pining and the hot scenes, and I want all of it. I love it. I've only been reading it for 2 years. You know what though? I have, and I can't draw on experience. Maybe you can if you've read romance longer. I can't draw on any experience of books that were the 80s romance or the 90s romance or even the early 2000s romance. I'm only drawing from more contemporary right now, or Jane Austen. Those are the only 2 references I have. And so, I have the real innocent Victorian pining kind of stories that I read way back in high school, and then skip forward to my 50s and I'm reading these like hot, reverse harem, I know, right? BDSM stuff.
Yeah, like the erotica really, or the really monster. Yeah.
The ladies on TikTok, they really like that kind of stuff. So I'm getting some recs from them, and although I have to dilute it sometimes. I'll like read like a real hot one, and then I'll like kind of go back to like a slow burn, pining kind of thing.
Yes.
So I'll like go back and forth, but I love the tropes. I mean, all of them are so fun. And it's like, what you're getting into, that there's going to be the older brother's best friend, or, that there's going to be the small town, second chance romance thing. What you're getting into, and that's good because, I want to read what I want to read. what I'm in the mood for.
Right. Exactly. And
So
and I've mentioned it before. And I've read romance for quite a while, since I was probably like preteens. But once you get into it, I mean, you just kind of want, like you said, just want more and more.
yeah,
And
yes.
that's kind of the fun thing about romance too, is there is very much a formula to it.
Mhm.
Like, and I think we just kind of, our brains are wired in a way that we like formulas, right? We kind of know
Yes.
what to expect, but
Yes.
you can do so much within that formula.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's like having an outline and then making little notes in the margins.
exactly.
And but your notes are going to be different from everybody else's notes.
Hmm.
And drawing on experience of being in love 1,000 times is I've got all of these different kinds of ideas of what romance is, and that
Yes.
helps also to make the stories different.
And that's I love when people bring that kind of authenticity, because I did. Corey felt like the heroine. Corey felt like a real person to me.
The
She
three-dimensional characters are so important.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
agree.
Yeah. And Corey did feel very much like, like you said, kind of party girl, or like focused, very career focused, very much kind of, she had lovers before, but then she found the one, and it felt different.
It
And
felt different.
yes, and you
Mhm.
conveyed that, you wrote that beautifully, because you could
Oh,
tell
thank
her, and
you.
yes, her and Jay had that chemistry, right? They had just
Yeah.
that wonderful chemistry.
And the opposites attract is something that isn't popular right now.
Mm.
uh I mean, the grumpy sunshine can be construed as a part of opposites attract and that trope,
Mhm.
but there's not a lot of the grumpy heroine.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I think we kind of like tweeted about it at each other, right? With
Mhm. Yeah,
about like the grumpy sunshine kind of debate there,
right.
because unfortunately, I think due to kind of patriarchal kind of society, sometimes
Maybe.
a grumpy woman can seem like a little bitchy or something like that,
Right, right, right.
But she
But
didn't come off that at all that way, though. She just
I
came
was
off
hoping that
strong.
I was
She came off
hoping that that was the case.
she came off like strong-willed. I know what I want,
Yeah.
kind of get out of my way kind of
Hmm.
thing. And I respect that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do, but it has to be done in the right way.
Exactly.
So another example that I really liked, who I fangirl all the time, is Mary Elizabeth wrote a series called the Hush series, and the first one was Tramp.
Mm.
And Lydia was probably the grumpiest heroine character I had ever read, and she was glorious. She was so gloriously grumpy. And she just was, I thought she was hilarious. And I think that if we can take the grumpy heroine and add a little humor to it, to where she's so grumpy that it's funny, but not in like a petty way. So that's a recommendation for sure. If you like the grumpier heroine, is the Hush series from, I mean, Mary Elizabeth. What a great example uh,
Mm.
in the Tramp and Criminal books that she has in that series.
You kind of mentioned before, like tropes kind of fall in and out of favor, right? There's kind of a
Mhm.
cyclical kind of trend to it. One thing I know that some people I've talked to, like other people who kind of dig into more the analytical side, have said is like, we do have a soaring lack of like female, what we would consider an anti-hero, right? And
Mhm.
maybe the more
Yeah.
grumpy female. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. If you add a little humor to it, or maybe a little more context of why she's grumpy,
Yes.
you can
That the
definitely.
context is very important.
Exactly.
Did you watch the show Dead to Me with Christina
I
Applegate?
did. I love Christina Applegate.
Okay, that character is a perfect example of
Yes.
somebody who is so over the top grumpy
Hmm.
that I just loved her. It's like
Hmm.
you feel, because everybody feels that way sometimes, the frustration and the, just nobody's doing what you want them to do kind of
Hmm.
situation.
Exactly.
And she that character was just, I love that character. And I want to write more like her.
You talked about adding like the authenticity, right, to your book. I have to ask, did you actually base like Safina on a real country?
No.
Okay.
So Safina is on the Levant coast of the Mediterranean,
Right.
which is so stunningly beautiful. And the past 30 years, all we've heard about the Middle East is either oil or terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
But the topography is stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very similar to the central coast of California, which I have been. It's also very similar to southern Greece, which I've also been to. The culture that I was trying to portray was very similar to the southern Greeks, where it was, they're very big in living off the ocean, like
Mm-hmm.
that's their breath is the Mediterranean. That's what breathes life into them. And I wanted to convey that to what it's in my descriptions in Safina, that everything is from the sea, that everything is the smells and the feeling of things are all affected by the Mediterranean. The cedar trees grow from, the cedar trees, which at the beginning of the story, Reese, our bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
it blows up a convoy of vehicles while crouching under a cedar tree that's in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And the cedar tree is the symbol of Lebanon. The cedar trees grow all along the coast of the Levant, and they're very important to the culture there. So the woodsy cedar trees mixed with the Mediterranean combine something that's very similar to here in California, where we have the desert, we have the mountains, and then we have the sea. So a lot of that was drawn on my upbringing here in California and the topography here.
Because it felt very like there was a lot of world building, a lot of culture building too. It felt
Yes.
real to me. Like there was a lot of history, there was a lot of depth there.
There is, yeah. There was just family dynamics. And
Hmm.
on a more simple level, you can get those same kind of family dynamics in almost any family, where
Right.
the men were in charge of everything, and they groomed their sons to take over their businesses. The daughters were just supposed to get married and,
Hmm.
but marry a wealthy guy and somebody that the family approves of. I mean, it's all, it's very, ingrained into our history, that kind of, and it surpasses cultures. It's not just, British Victorian culture, Regency culture. It's not just Asian cultures. It's all cultures were like
Hmm.
that for a very long time, and some of them still are. Showing the dynamics of the family and how each member of the family might be treated,
Hmm.
was something that I looked very close into. But drawing on, the Regency stories of the royal families. And, even at one point, Corey refers to how the only thing that she knew about royal families was from Jane Austen books.
That's true.
That's the only thing she knew of. That, oh my gosh, when they find out I'm an insufferable harlot, they're going to pay me off and send me to the Americas.
Well, and I like how you kind of leveraged that, like, and especially the 90s too. Like, I mean, it still happens today, but like in the 90s, it was even more prolific,
Yes.
right? That like men are the ones who take over or take charge as opposed to women. And you even call that out when you mention like Azari.
Yes,
Was
Princess
that? Yes,
Azari.
Princess
Mhm.
Azari was
Yes.
smarter and better actually at kind of ruling than her twin brother, but
Yeah.
she kind of got sidelined because she was a girl, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And the twins were a funny thing. I'm an identical twin. And I love writing twins, especially when it's a boy and a girl,
Mhm.
because they are so similar but so different at the same time because they're a boy and a girl. But I'd like to draw on the fact that they would have the same kind of facial expressions or mannerisms that you could tell that they're twins, even though it's a man and a woman. But yeah, with the king, Nico, who had been thrust upon being king and really just liked women and wine and song and poetry, and then his like hard-nosed sister who like knew how to get things done and could read people and
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
it's but she's a woman, so she got sidelined, like you said. And then you can flip it to where she's the flibberty gibbet and he's the serious one. I mean, it's family dynamics are like that. That's what's so fun about writing them, is that you can flip things upside down and you can sort of take little things like the fact that Azari knew exactly how to negotiate, get the women. We'll talk to the women, and they can convince the men. Like from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the women are the neck. We can turn the head any way we want.
So you really leveraged the 90s settings, I felt like, to the utmost degree, like with like I said, the kind of the dynamics there with the Middle East, because I know there was a lot of tension at the time with the Middle East and kind of that upcoming war. So you kind of utilize that all to your benefit.
We were coming off one war before the second one. This was the first one that started in 89. So it was in between the two. So there had already been one of the reasons that I wanted to set it there was because in the late 80s, early 90s, we started hearing about all these little countries for the first time, the Kuwaits and the Qatars and the Jordans. And I had never heard of any of these countries before. And they all had so much money and royal families, and I didn't know about any of this. I thought there was like, the Saudis, and they were the royal family and they had all the oil and that was it. But there's all these little itty bitty countries there, and they all had their own little dynamics going on in their own little royal families. And in college, I had a couple of friends who were first generation Americans. And they, both of them, one of them really loved like gangster rap and the other one really loved heavy metal, but they were from these very traditional Middle Eastern countries. Their families were, and they both drove these like brand new souped up BMWs and had all this money. And it's like, who are these guys? I mean, they're the same age as me. They grew up like right down the street from me, but who are they? Right. I got a BMW at 19, So I became friends with them, and I went to my friend Rasha's house for dinner one night, and they had a housekeeper and this big, huge house with these, high ceilings. And I mean, it was over the top. And the food was just this like, really rich Middle Eastern inspired food. And they barely spoke English to me, the family. And he was apologetic the whole time. He was like, I'm so sorry, they're not really, you're not from where I'm from. And so they, I'm like, but we're not a couple. And he's like, I know. They don't know that. I'm like, oh, like, okay, fine, but the fact that, and then in his room, it was like, he had his, he loved American football, so he was like a huge football fan. He had like 3 jerseys he was really American, even though his family wasn't. And so that was one of the inspirations for Reese and Jay also, was that they were raised American. And they like the American teenager things, like heavy metal, like fast American cars, like, all of the things that are so American, but their family was from this very traditional royal family in the Middle East. And back then we didn't really know a lot about them.
Yeah. And you did create a great dichotomy between it, because when Jay was in Safina, he was very revered. People were very formal to him, but he's just like, I'm just some schmuck from New York. Basically,
know, right?
it was like that kind of I know. Yeah. He just had that mentality of like, I'm just like any other guy out there in like New York. And it was such a cool, like I said, a really cool dichotomy you created, because like he's just like, I feel like I'm just anyone else in America. And yet when I go back to this country, it's kind of a big deal, right?
You wanted him to be the leader. Yeah.
Exactly. And you could feel that there was this kind of push and pull of like, but do I stay because I have a whole nother life in America, or should I really lead these people, you know? And and it was no spoilers, but it resolved. Don't worry. So we're good.
It's a romance.
It is, of course. We got to have our HEA, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, and just to clarify, it is a standalone, correct?
No.
Oh, it isn't? Okay. Good.
Good.
I have it kind of left the door open.
I have a prequel. I have Azari's story.
Oh, I loved Azari. She's my fave.
I did too. She warranted her story, I think. It still needs a lot of polishing and a lot of work. And, you know, because I'm very new to writing. And there's a structure to it that I'm still learning. And so I've had, for Two Princes, I had an amazing coach who, you know, took a mess, an absolute mess, and helped me make it, you know, readable. And then my publisher at Parcel and Page, she really, really polished it and tightened it and made sure that that the story kept going, and it didn't have any awkward pauses, because I have full dossiers on my characters. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the food they like and their favorite color. And one time, you know, the dog got stuck in a well, and, you know, I mean, I could go on with the backgrounds of these characters, but, you know, I had to pull it back.
I know. A lot of times it hurts to kill your darlings, right?
It really does. Because I had a whole story on how Reese and Corey met, and it kills me that history needed to be pulled back. But it did. The pace of the story suffered from it. And so we needed to keep it going, beat. So it worked out, but maybe a bonus chapter one of these days.
Oh, fantastic. Well, and that is something I will say, like, I would call this, like, one of my other guests had mentioned that she likes to call her books a easy beach read. And this is exactly how I would kind of categorize this too, because I just kept wanting to go. Like there was so much, it wasn't overwhelming, but there was a lot, it just kept moving. Kind of like you said, it was just like, we never slowed down too much. It was just kind of like, you could easily just kind of keep flipping to the next page. And before you know it, it's like 3:00 in the morning. And you're like, what am I doing?
I think characters do that. I think when you have the B and C characters that you have something to something important to give to the story, that you can add them in, like the captain and how his father, Reese killed his father, and how all of a sudden he wanted revenge. So that's a whole other story within the story. How Nico the king wanted his home back. That was another part of the story. So bringing in the B and C characters, and Azari also obviously had a big part of the story as well. So bringing in all those other little characters really does make the story go forward, I think.
You created that background, like you just gave it just enough context to understand kind of where everyone was, but you can tell you've done the work at least for the background of a lot of these characters, because they all felt, no matter how short or long they were on screen, on page, technically
in the scene,
right, you could definitely tell that there was they had their own backstory. They weren't just a blank character, like there for filler. They had all of them had their own story, and they felt all very, like you said, three-dimensional.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's what keeps stories interesting and going forward, and can spin off into, sequels and prequels and novellas and, all that kind of thing. And that's a franchise. Who doesn't want a
Absolutely.
franchise?
Yeah, who doesn't love a good series? Right? Just
Absolutely.
keep going. And you did mention, because you said you had like dossiers worth on
Mhm.
every character.
Yeah.
What have you kind of learned since this was kind of your first like published novel?
Mostly in the editing process.
Okay.
Most of the things I'm still learning.
Mhm.
I don't know if you could see my surfboard,
I
but
love
this
that, by
is
the way.
this is like the plotting edits of a story that's already written, that I have an editor wanting me to pare down the background stories of
Mhm.
my B and C characters, and my A and B characters. Actually, I mean, they have like this rich history. um but this is what I've had to learn. And since I'm what you call a pantser, that
Mm,
I fly by the seat of my pants and I just write. um there's a lot of background and info dump that I have to pare back. And that was the thing for me to do, because I love my characters so much, and I want everybody to see who they are, and their full colored three dimensions, even the B and C characters. And that just, it slows down the story a lot of the time. That's the hardest part for me, is the editing process. It's not like, oh,
yeah.
my writing is fabulous, and I can tell the story that I want to tell, and that's fine. But it's not an ego thing. It's I love this character, and I want to show this one part where she, doesn't have enough money to buy lip gloss.
Mhm.
And then she like finds a $5 bill on the floor. I mean, but who needs that story? Nobody.
I
What does it have to do with
know.
anything?
I know. That is the hardest
I mean,
part.
it's character building, but still, it doesn't need to be in the story. So yeah,
Exactly.
I'm learning that. I'm learning that. Yeah.
Well, and that's important. It's important that you kind of like, you've taken those things and you kind of like learn to, move with it, right? And kind of like, okay, so let's adjust the story as we go. Because
Exactly.
a lot of times that's one of the hardest parts as an author, I think, is kind of trying to take that feedback and say, okay, how can I make this story better?
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. And in the process, you read it so many times
Yes.
that sometimes you just don't see it anymore.
Hmm.
And when I reached out to the community, and I'm like, I can't even see anything wrong with it. I think it's perfect. What do you think? The community totally stepped up. And I got great beta readers who gave me great, input into, well, I don't really think you need this character. Oh, well, it kind of stalls right here. I mean, it was so fabulous. And then there's like uh pitch wars and mentor pitch and kiss pitch and all of the pitch contests where you can win to get your manuscript critiqued by
Hmm.
an expert. I mean, those, you have to take advantage of those. Those are so amazing. And I got great feedback from those also. And those contests are, yes, there's some agents that go into them, but I think there's so much more to getting those experts to look at your manuscript than it
Hmm.
is to get the attention of an agent,
Hmm.
because you may have read it a bazillion times over the past 10 years, and you just don't see it anymore sometimes. And this is a fresh look from someone who knows what they're doing, who has done it before, who knows what the publishers or what the agents want. And the ego has to be sidelined.
Hmm.
It has to be sidelined.
Yeah. And as an author, it's so important that we do leverage kind of those avenues that are available to us, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the utilization of like I said, the online community, or those experts that are saying we want to do a pitch war. So kind of pitch us your
Yeah.
idea for a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll add really great feedback.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
what I've found too, is I've found beta readers or friends through that community
Mhm.
who have
Yep.
helped, they helped, I think, grow me as an author.
Absolutely.
I think it's an important thing. This is just a PSA for all of my listeners. So if you are an author, utilize, right? Utilize that.
Absolutely. The networking was, something that I had to do in my second and third lives, and it's so important. Um, but this community is so open and willing to help that it makes it so much easier to reach out.
There is kind of a camaraderie there, right?
Yeah.
To where like people are open, and everyone I've talked to who's been on this podcast has been more than happy every single time to be here and talk.
Absolutely.
So like, yeah, so people are willing to give their time. So
and listen to podcasts like this to get, a little bit of insight. And, it doesn't have to be from the multi-billion-dollar selling your book at not only Barnes and Noble, but like, Target and the airports, and being one of those huge authors like that. Everybody's been in the trenches at one point. And listening to people who are in the trenches with you at the moment, it's been cathartic.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I will talk to my author friends sometimes and be like, we have these author problems where just like, you guys know, when you have like this one scene that you just can't write and you're just fighting every word.
Yes.
Like sometimes you need those bonding moments, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Someone understands you.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
This is something I've kind of asked other author friends before, and I know I kind of looked at it to myself. So is there anything you kind of wish you'd known before? Like before starting like your writing journey? Is there anything
before starting the writing journey?
Yeah.
It's all so surreal. I mean, I just, in less than 2 years, I had a publishing contract. It was it's still really, really surreal to me that I got to this part. I never thought I wanted to be a writer, and I never thought I wanted to publish a book.
So did you seek out publishing? So how
I
did that kind of come
So,
about? Okay.
Well, when I wrote this, I'm like, okay, yay, I wrote it, but now what do I do? And so I just started doing research on the publishing community, and talking to, being a part of the social media communities, and like, okay, so next thing you have to do is get an agent. I'm like, okay, well, I grew up in LA. I did a little acting when I was little. I know a whole agent thing. So, okay. All right. So you write your query letter, and there's a lot of resources out there to teach you how to write the query letter, which were very similar to the advertising proposals I used to write. And then it occurred to me that this is a product now. I know how to sell a product. I know how to sell it. I had my boutique, the resale store with my mom and my sister, and we bought it in 2010 when businesses were just starting to get onto Facebook and Instagram, and we grew our social media presence for that one little boutique, tripled in the first 2 years, quadrupled. I mean, we have over 30,000 followers for one little boutique in Manhattan Beach, California. And it was because we had a product and we knew how to sell it. My mom and my sister and I were, we were in advertising and marketing and public relations, and we knew how to sell a product. And I'm like, okay, I wrote this book, I have a product. And now I have to write a proposal to sell my product. And so that was the premise of the queries. That was where my knowledge was. I knew what I was doing when I was pitching agents.
Well, and I love how you kind of used all that in like all those past lives, right? Part of those past lives to kind of help you.
They all just kind of coagulated together, and was able to put this package together. With the pitch on the Twitter pitch, with the query letter, with the the summary, all of it. I had done for countless products and services before, and so it was, I kind of knew how to do it. But then, I wasn't getting the responses that I thought I would from the agents. So I started thinking about it, and I was like, back when I was in newspapers, we went through a process in the late 90s where there was all of a sudden things were going online. And we all scrambled to learn how to monetize advertising online. We were scrambling trying to figure out how to monetize it, because when you sell an ad in W magazine, a full page 4-color ad in W magazine, it could be $50,000 and you get 10% of it on your commission. So, I was bringing in the bank, but then you do a little tile ad on a website of the newspaper and you're just like, okay, well, that costs $30, nothing to produce, and I get 10% of that. So all of a sudden things were so micro, and newspapers, as were going out of business.
Right, exactly.
Because the margins, nobody wanted to pay $50,000 for a full page 4-color anymore when they could get a $30 tile on the website. So things shrunk. I'm a Bloomberg addict, and I saw how the big publishing houses were either folding or merging. And there's only 4 left?
I think so, yeah. 4 or 5.
And the agents, and there's hundreds of agents, and the agents only pitch to these 4 publishing houses for the most part, because that's where they get the bonuses from. That's where they get the big marketing dollars and the international distribution and all of that, right? So on a 2-tier level, the e-reader and ebooks were very similar to what was happening with the full page in the magazine and then the little tile. The margins shrunk, and 80% of readers read on e-readers now. And so when you're not selling a $20 book, but you have everybody downloading a free $4 e-file, the margins shrink.
We've talked about before, self-publishing is kind of the great equalizer, right?
Yeah.
And we got the same amount
and small presses.
Exactly. And like you have the same amount of authors, if not, actually, I heard the numbers grow now for the amount of authors.
Yeah.
And you've had, like you said, a shrunken amount of the big publishing houses.
Exactly.
And you're just creating a bottleneck.
Exactly. And so what's so great is that from the ashes is the entrepreneurism, which we saw also in the early 2000s, where now, unfortunately, we didn't know what we were doing. So we created a bubble that popped, which we learned from it. It's all good. It happens. Some people lost money. Some people made money. It was all good. It was a real good learning process.
Exactly.
And so for the early 2000s, you saw a lot of entrepreneurism. You saw that there were websites that were coming up that were a little bit more edgy, a little bit more willing to take risks than your local newspaper or the New York Times or the LA Times, or, they were willing to take a little bit more risks when they were reporting stories. And so the advertising dollars that were smaller, they were able to get smaller companies to advertise. So all of a sudden, the smaller companies were getting bigger, and the smaller publications were getting bigger because they were online and didn't have the overhead of printing.
Exactly. Yes.
So this is so similar to that of what's going on in publishing, is that with e-readers and ebooks becoming so popular and so easy and user friendly, I'm a huge advocate. I have Kindle Unlimited. I love my Kindle Unlimited, because there's a lot of self-publishing. And, if I were self-published, I would have pages and pages of my characters' backstories. thank God for this, for Parcel and Page that took my story and edited me and pulled me back and held me there.
Specifically romance, but there are like a ton of books and genres that do this, where they just kind of pump out all these stories, and they're pretty, they're so easy to kind of, okay, I can download this with I have the same, I have Kindle Unlimited. So I'm just like,
if you're an avid reader,
that one, I want that one. Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, I'm always reading on my phone, and I travel quite a bit for work sometimes. So I'm just like, well, that's an easy read on the plane. So I'm taking that one, obviously download all these. But yes, it's just, there's so much content out there nowadays. And you do need, I think, if you're self-published and you can do that, more power to you. Awesome. But I'm kind of with you on, sometimes you do need a mediator there, and like to help like rein you in and kind of walk you through the process, especially if you're so new to it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
Now, I do have to ask, since you made reference and you're kind of pointing at that surfboard, that wonderful, like, I love it. It's so on brand too for your surfer story.
I have, yes. So I was in a kind of an outer body experience when I wrote a different book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit more of a Romancing the Stone kind of dual point of view, a little bit of rom-com, very different than Two Princes. It's because Two Princes is written third person, which was great because I had so many characters and I needed to get into all of their heads. So Two Princes needed to be, and I was reading a lot of Skye Warren when I was writing Two Princes, and she is like my queen of intrigue. I love her. And very, very, very steamy. When I was writing The Perpetual, which is a second chance romance, but also with 50 plus characters, or like over 50, I was reading a lot of T.L. Swan. And she does great dual point of views. And she throws in a little bit of humor and a little bit of adventure and a little bit of mystery and intrigue. And there's influences, definitely some influences with the books that I've been reading and the authors that I really like. And so when I started querying Two Princes, because I thought it was a little bit more polished since I've been working with a coach on it, I fell in love with the second story on a whole other level. And I just like, you know what? I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm going to throw it against the wall and see if it sticks, because it was such, everybody loves Romancing the Stone. And it was so in that vein, this story, that I felt like I really had to just kind of get it out there while it was hot. After I did Two Princes, a different publisher, a small publisher came to me and they said, we want The Perpetual, the surfer story. Okay. And so that is what I'm editing right now and is supposed to be out in September. So from not ever writing before, I have 2 books coming out.
Yeah. And all within a couple of months of each other, like 3 or 4 months. That's amazing. Was The Perpetual 2 one of the ones? I know, it's exciting, girl. You should be excited.
It's insane.
I know. It's kind of surreal. It is.
It is. It's totally surreal.
But but how awesome is that you've kind of pivoted into that? And man, you went hard.
Go big. Go big. Yeah. Fucking 50s, man.
There you go.
Go big.
I love that. And was The Perpetual one of those stories you had already written within, you said, like that 4 or 5 month period? Okay.
Yeah. That was my hormone induced.
Well, now I know what to expect. That's good. That's good. I like it. It's going to get a little,
medium.
The
Perpetual is super steamy. Probably more than Two Princes. So yeah. But it moves the story forward. It doesn't it's not there for gratuitous reasons. It's there because, it's there because it moves the story. It's part of the story. So, and turning 50, I didn't want to be the old lady. And I still wanted to be seen as attractive and desirable. And it's just hard to feel that way. And I wanted to write a character where she didn't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then a guy from her past comes and reminds her that she is. And it has nothing to do with the fact that she put on a few pounds or that she has some wrinkles around her eyes or, that it's sexy as a state of mind.
But you're right. It is kind of like that. Fuck it 50s. It's like the sexy is a state of mind.
It is.
And I think you're only as young as you feel, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
and
I wanted to write a character like that. And then, when it comes to Princess Azari, also, I started a third book with the Salas family. And that one, Azari gets a second chance with an old lover. So, because she's a widow in the first one, she's just recently widowed in the first one. So, yeah, I really would love to tap into that very, very small genre. It's small, and I realize that it's not going to be, the most popular. I mean, there's not a lot of people in their 20s that want to read about, people in their 50s having sex. Sometimes I feel old, sometimes I don't. It depends. But the good news is that, my husband's also old. So
there you go.
So the two of us have our little ailments together,
exactly.
and we have our challenges when it comes to, our romantic notions these days.
Things change as you get a little bit older.
Yeah.
So I love that that's kind of incorporated there, and you get to see.
Well, good. Then you'll love the perpetual.
I can't wait. You just said Romancing the Stone, so I was just like all on board, no matter what.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, with me, it's so funny because I was writing a sequel to the perpetual, and I was like, oh God, I can't do another kidnapping because every one of my stories happens to have a kidnapping. And I had to pull back from the third kidnapping story because, that can't be my brand.
That's true. That's true. It becomes one real quick because we did.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I love a good fight scene and a good chase scene. So yeah.
Yeah, just amazing. Just like perfection. I thought the two princes really delivered on all those fronts. God. So I loved, wow. Like you said, great action. I was on the edge of my seat. I loved it. So if you're interested in, you want suspense, you want romance, you're looking for, 90s nostalgia or like royalties or like the grumpy sunshine trope. I mean, the Two Princes has it all, guys. So I don't
want to scare anybody by saying that it's a love triangle, because a lot of people don't like that trope. But
yes,
it's it's slight. It's a slight love triangle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it didn't take quite as much. I thought it would be a bigger element in the story, but it wasn't quite, like you said, it was kind of like I would say like maybe tertiary to the actual story itself. But it was there. It was there. Yeah. So, but
and then the title, Two Princes, I mean, you're just,
Oh, fair point.
It is about the song, and the song's about a love triangle too. Mm-hmm. So, but in like a sort of a real watered down kind of way. So yeah, no, it's not a huge element in the story.
It is there. And you do have to clarify. I do appreciate that you did clarify it was a love triangle, because some people might think two princes and be like, so reverse harem? Are we like, like things like that? You just have to clarify. So
I can see that. Yes. I can see that. Read a few of those myself.
Exactly. Because that's kind of where my mind went first. Because like you said, it just isn't that popular, at least right now in the reading landscape. Right. So that's kind of where my brain first went. But I was like, oh no, it is.
Very small element of the story.
Where people can find your books and how can they connect to you?
So I am, like I said, I am on all social media platforms. Usually since my last name is so long, I try to make sure that it's a little bit more accessible. So I usually do either the Cindy Keh or the CMKEH stories. For CMKEH stories is Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Cindy Keh stories, or Cindy Kehagiaras stories, I'm sorry, is Facebook. And then I have a website, and all of the link to the website is all on there, and a link to Amazon to buy Two Princes in pre-sale until the 10th, and then it's going to be available. It'll also be available on iBook. I think that's where we're starting out, is those two places, is iBook and Kindle.
Perfect. So yeah, everyone should go out and grab a copy.
Yeah. And again, I have the link on my website. There's also a link on the Parcel and Page website. It's definitely on Amazon. So, and then I also have a Goodreads page. So please review and give me good reviews so that we can bring about the rest of the stories here from these wonderful people.
Thanks so much to Cindy for being part of the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or are enjoying the podcast, please be sure to rate, review, or subscribe. I love hearing feedback. So if you guys want a specific guest or a specific topic covered in an episode, please feel free to reach out to me at Romance the Story. Book recommendations for this episode: Two Princes by Cindy Kehagiaras. As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing. Bye!